And I'm so happy that spring football is actually upon us, and I know you are too. I'm going to ask you to make a prediction. You and somebody on InsideTexas.com is going to be writing a recap tomorrow from day one of spring practice.
Multiple.
Give me a couple of guys that you think will stand out. Like, who are you going to be writing about tomorrow from the first day of Texas spring ball, because they turned that many heads, they impressed that many people?
Woo! BK, always bringing the questions. That's a good question. I'm going to be looking at Cam Williams tomorrow or Tuesday. Yeah, tomorrow for at right tackle. Texas wants him to take that spot. And they have every intention of they're not going to give it to him. He's going to have to go take it. Still has to drop a little weight. Still has to get his protections down. Still gets beat by those speed rushers on the outside. But Cam Williams is the next guy up. And so I want to write about Cam. I want to see what he can do. Now, granted, these are half shell. They're not hitting. So the first few days is going to be just basically knocking the rust off, going through the motions. I want to see what Cam Williams looks like coming into his third season on the offensive side. I want to write about these receivers. I mean, they don't have a lot of size, but my goodness, they have a lot of speed. I mean, at every single spot, it's no longer. That's the norm in Austin. I want to see that on the offensive side. On the defensive side, I want to see where Trey Moore is. Is he a jack behind Sorrell, or is he on the other side? Is he playing some will in the dime? Like, we'd heard so much good stuff about Trey Moore. I want to see kind of how he acclimates to playing at this next level, or higher level, rather, coming from UTSA. And Andrew Makuba, where's he going to be? Where's Jahdae Barron going to be? We know he's been working out at corner some. I don't think that's going to be his position in the fall. I think they just love to have his versatility and the ability that he can play corner, but they already have two really good ones in Terrence Brooks and Manny Muhammad. And I'm not entrusting Jalen Gilbo with the nickel role just yet. Now, he's flashed a little bit last year. He's done really well in winter conditioning, but Barron knows that spot. Barron and Michael Taft know Star like the back of their hand. And so I'm curious how much Barron's going to be running at corner, who's going to be backing up Star, how much they know. I mean, goodness gracious, I could almost go through every position. There's a lot of stuff I want to see this week, guys.
Justin, as far as the defensive line is concerned, Texas obviously has to replace a ton of talent and experience on the interior with Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, now a little bit more than a month from finding out who their NFL team is going to be. Who do you think is most up to task in proving that they deserve the most minutes on the inside as we are about to embark on spring ball?
The two big guys you really want to assert themselves are Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton. Last year, they were the first guys off the bench. They provided 20 to 25 reps a game, which is exactly what that Texas defensive front wants to do. They want to rotate guys. That way, Sweat and Murphy were only getting 25, 30 snaps a game. That keeps them fresh, keeps them healthy, and it provides a much better product in the fourth quarter. So I want to see Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins step up and take those jobs. Tia Savea may have something to say about that. The Arizona transfer that followed Johnny Nanson's a guy that I think you're going to have to pay closer attention to. I think he's one that's some people think, oh, he'll just be a backup. Well, he doesn't think like that. And he doesn't have the production the last 2 years that thinks like that either. So that's another guy to step up. The one guy I think I would love to hear glowing remarks about is Sadir Mitchell.
Yeah.
You take one defensive tackle in that class. Granted, he's bigger than every other defensive tackle you could have taken in that class. You know, he could be disguised as a large human on the offensive line if he needed to be. He fits into that mold. But look, Sadir has every bit of upside you want at that position. He is large. He's in charge. When he is on, he is tough to block. And he's only going into his second year. And so for me, I think, of being able to be on the field. So for me, I would love to hear Sadir Mitchell's name. If we're hearing about Sadir Mitchell, the defensive line issues, I think, will become less of a problem in 2024.
I'm with it. Justin Wells of Inside Texas joining us here on Texas Sports Unfiltered. Jay Wells, what about the running back spot? We got a glimpse of life after Jonathan Brooks at the end of the season. We saw C.J. Baxter. We saw Jaden Blue. Jarrett Gibson coming in, 5-star freshman. Is that
230.
is that an open competition? Is that, CJ Baxter started his freshman year as the starter? Is he the guy? Is that going to be open? What should we expect from the running backs over the next month or so?
Ultimately, this is where Tashard Choice is going to have to do some work. He inherited Rashawn Johnson and Bijan, and I think that was kind of an easier year. And then last year, you really saw him assert Jonathan Brooks. He knew that they had something special there, and Brooks just took it and run. I mean, he became the home run guy.
Yeah.
We thought they were going to lose all that home run ability. Jonathan Brooks said, "No, I got it." So who are you going to replace that with? Well, honestly, I think it's going to be by committee. But how's that going to be ordered? CJ Baxter was the starter going into week 1 last year, and I think ideally they would love for Baxter to step up because he's the big back. Yeah, I know Gibson's thicker than he was in the last couple of years. But CJ is your big Cedric Benson-esque type back who can run between the tackles, who can get to the outside, who can just do a lot of good stuff. That being said, Jaden Blue has made himself a smack dab in the middle of this conversation, simply because he's probably the top 3 fastest players in the program. And last year, when they put him on the field, he produced. There was no lagging. There was no setback. If anything, they might have gotten more playmaking ability out of Blue than they actually did Baxter. Now, granted, Baxter was injured a little bit off and on last year, but it's going to come in as a committee. I think Baxter's going to be the first guy that we see in the line for drills, and I think Blue is going to be second. And I think they're going to tell both of them, look, be Bijan and Rashawn. Make it work. You're both going to be needed. They're both going to be handed the ball a number of times. You know how much Sark really likes that 1,000-yard back to have in every class? I'm not sure they have one of those in this season. I think they have 2 guys that can get to 750, which would be, an aggregate and just as good because obviously you're keeping them fresh and you're keeping them healthy. And then you got Savion Red. Like, they're going to find a package of plays for that guy. Now, he was listed at 240. And I swear, every year Red has been on this roster, he gets bigger.
God.
And we always say, well, maybe he's too big. Maybe he's not going to play as much. And we're wrong. He winds up finding the field. Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark are going to try to get a couple carries back there if they can. But this is CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue's show. I think it's going to be a 1-2 punch. I think you're going to hear great things about both. One day, Baxter's going to be your better back. The next day, Blue is. I think Texas fans should just settle in right now on it's a dual committee. These are the 2 guys. It's going to be Blue and Baxter and Blue, the killer bees. Just rely on those guys because at some point they'll separate. Either Baxter will break out, Blue will break out. Something will separate to where one will get a few more carries than the other. But I got to tell you, I think Baxter is going to be the incumbent. I think they want him to jump up and take that job. But, he's a big kid. At the same time, Jaden Blue can catch the ball out of the backfield. Jaden Blue in space is an absolute terror, and we know how much Sark puts an emphasis on speed on offense.
Yeah, nobody should be surprised that these coaches want CJ Baxter to be the dude. He started over Jonathan Brooks at the beginning of last season.
He earned that starting spot in the fall camp over Brooks, mind you.
Look, you're the expert here. I'm just a guy who watched Brooks play the previous season and was scratching my head that he wasn't getting more run.
Right.
So I completely understand your sources said that, but it'll be interesting. I love that you guys did report yesterday. You just talked about this. Savion Red, 240 pounds. It's not like this dude is like 6'1" or 6'2". He's on the shorter side as well. Is he basically just gearing up for more of those short yardage packages like what we saw out of him last season?
You know what? I think his body's predisposed to going in that direction. I don't know if he can help it. Now, I mean, extensive training and healthy eating and dieting and things of that sort could hold him back. But you know what? We said the same thing about Red. I remember last year, first practice of spring camp, Red was like number 6 or 7 in that line, that drill line. And often that tells you where they are on the depth chart, or the early depth chart rather. And so we thought, man, Red's going to have to work his way back in this lineup. And he did. He actually slimmed down throughout the summer, got back in a little bit of shape. and wind up having a nice package of plays because I'm going to tell you something, nobody plays harder. Him or Trey Wisner, those are probably the two hardest players. I mean, it's 100% all the time, and I think that's why they love Savion because he is such a competitor. But 240? I mean, I'll say this. I was at Under Armour high school recruiting camp yesterday in Houston, and I met Brandon Jacobs. Remember the running back from the New York Giants?
Yeah,
sure.
And you see him from a distance, and you're like, okay, that guy played in the NFL or somewhere in college, and he was probably a defensive lineman. I mean, he is massive. And then you go up to him, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is Brandon Jacobs. This dude played running back. My God, just massive.
Yeah.
I don't think Savion Red wants to go down that road because he's not as big as Jacobs, but 240 at some point you're going to have to put the Cokes down and the honey buns down and pick up some fruit, drink some more water, and get down to a nice slim, trim 225.
Yeah, that's why it was a bummer to read and hear just now that Cam Williams still has some bad weight that he needs to take off. Like, now is the time for him to be completely locked in on that stuff. And if he's not, as we've talked about on the show in the past, there are other guys who are ready to jump up and take that starting right tackle opportunity.
There are guys that watched Tavondre Sweat and Christian Jones last offseason who went through a full body transformation. And they're seeing how they did in the Senior Bowl. They saw how they did in the Combine. So they picked up where those guys left off. If Cam Williams jumps on in that boat and does the same thing, I think Cam's your right tackle week 1. If he doesn't, this line's going to look different. You could look at Hayden Connor going out to right tackle, even though I don't like his arm length, which Cole Hudson would be, perfect at left guard. You've also got Trevor Gooseby, who could be a future left tackle. He's the backup for Kelvin Banks. He's already flashed. He might be the best of that 23 group, could play some right tackle. Then you got Brandon Baker, the 5-star out of Mater Dei, who has the most athletic upside of everyone. So if you're Cam Williams, just turn around and look over your shoulder because you got guys chomping at the bit. And if you don't get where flooding these guys need and want you to get, you're going to get left behind.
J-Wells, recruiting question. We asked you a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, about Decorian Moore, 5-star receiver from Duncanville, the LSU commit. I saw earlier today on IT, you posted an update on Khalil Lockett, another 5-star receiver in the state. How you feeling about Texas being able to land one, perhaps both of the two top receivers in the state of Texas for the class of 2025?
I feel good. I mean, I really do. And I tell you that because Texas isn't pushing hard on any of these guys. They're letting the product speak for itself. And, Sark always plays the long game anyway. But give Chris Jackson a ton of credit. He's been able to really, he's working off the development of the last year of a lot of those receivers, especially the young guys, Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore. We knew what Worthy and Mitchell had and Whittington had. Now, Decorian Moore's recruitment, it doesn't start till November. It's fun to watch. Going to be fun to watch him play. He's going to stay committed to LSU for a while, but that recruitment doesn't really kick off till November. And I love where Texas stands there. They're going to make a final push, and I like their shot. Then you got Khalil Lockett, who, I mean, if I left the recorder on long enough, he could film a promo for the Texas wide receiver room. I mean, he essentially told me, who wouldn't want to be a part of this? And what's funny is I talked to a lot of the receivers yesterday that are Texas targets. Only Lockett knew the depth chart top to bottom. Lockett goes through each guy. He said, well, I know Jonte. We played with Texas Flex. Been watching DeAndre Moore. We know what Isaiah Bond can bring. He came from Alabama. Matthew Golden's a speed dude out of Houston. Lockett's doing his homework.
Wow.
And I think it's a twofold. I think Texas is doing a good job selling, and I think Lockett's buying. I really do. And so I love where Texas stands with those two guys. I love where they stand with Andrew Marsh, who might be the number 3 receiver in the state. I love where they stand with Marcus Harris, who's a top 10, top 15 national guy out of Mater Dei. And so, they're recruiting guys in 2 different tiers. And I think I think the numbers 3, maybe 4 at that position in 2025, if they can get a couple of those top guys, a Marsh, a Marcus Harris, a Khalil Lockett, and then push for Decorian Moore late, Chris Jackson will have made his check for the 2025 class.